Welcome to the Be Better broadcast, where we bring you tips and strategies and techniques to help you to live an extraordinary life and to help you to achieve self-mastery. You know, we love to bring you guests who are experts in all the different areas of life, from your emotions to finances to your spirituality, but also in the world of business. But we're not just talking about business today. While it heavily relates to the world of business, we're going to be talking about how you can become a world-class leader heading into 2022. We're closing this year out strong, but what does it actually look like to be a world-class leader in today's climate? What does it look like to be world-class in this virtual world that we're living in today? Not just a world-class leader in business, but a world-class leader for your family, for your community, for your social circles, all the clubs you're in, as well as your workplace or your own business personally. And to do that, we have one of the most world-class leaders with us ourselves today, someone who's worked with a plethora of organizations and people and even astronauts, which we're going to talk about here in a second. His name is John Bates, and I'm going to introduce you to him. But the one thing that we ask before each show is we don't run ads. We don't have sponsors. The only thing that we ask is when you find a piece of value from this conversation, whether you learn something, whether we made you laugh, we made you smile, we gave you a different perspective, a different way of thinking, simply share this show with one person who could use the information that we share. Share it with a colleague, share it with a friend, share it with somebody that you care about, but only share it with them if you want them to be more of a world-class leader, because that is what is going to happen when we speak to our friend, Mr. John Bates. And for those who don't know John Bates, John is an in-demand executive coach, and he is one of the most prolific TED format coaches in the world. He's worked with executives from organizations like Johnson & Johnson's, JLabs, NASA, including the astronauts, U.S. Navy Special Ops, and more. Recommend him to their colleagues as the best leadership communication coach working today. His mission is to bring out what is awesome inside you so that it can live in the world and make a real difference. He designs his programs using principles derived from neurobiology so that your communication is as mighty as your ideas. His ongoing program, Live Like a Leader, supports executives, entrepreneurs, influencers, and leaders in being fully integrated, influential leaders. And we're going to talk all about that program as well as Speak Like a Leader, his course, in this conversation. But I don't get a ton of recommendations for people sending people to this show. The only recommendations I get are from esteemed individuals. And I had a conversation a couple months ago on the show with Sabrina Starling. We talked all about entrepreneurship. And Sabrina says, Brandon, this was a great conversation. We had a lot of fun. You have to speak to John Bates. He is engaging. He's incredible to work with. He's an expert in the field of leadership. I've learned a lot from him myself. And I said, Sabrina, I'm always looking to talk to great people. And she sent John my way. So, John, I'm happy we were able to make this a reality. And it's a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend.
Brandon, likewise. Thank you. Thank you. And boy, I'm a total fan of Dr. Sabrina. She's a brilliant, brilliant woman and does great, great work. And she has made a huge difference for me as well. So, it's cool. I think just good to be around good people, right? Good things happen.
Absolutely. You are the average of the people you spend the most time around, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you do a lot, okay? And you've got a lot of experience in the world of leadership, literally working with astronauts, working with, Navy Special Ops. So how do you make your way into this world of working with executives and being a TED format coach? Like, how do you make your way into this world of leadership and coaching?
The way I got this job is by just failing at everything else I did. I think that's just the fundamental truth. But here's the slightly longer story. I was always the guy with the soft skills, and I worked with a lot of people who had the hard skills because I've been on the internet and in the internet industry since 1994. I started working at a .com company, and I always was a founder or a co-founder or a single digit early employee. And uh, I worked with these people with the hard skills. I was always the chief evangelist. I raised several $100 million in Silicon Valley and beyond, but they still called what I did fluffy. And
Wow.
so I had this chip on my shoulder. I'd go around trying to prove I was valuable. Secretly, I felt like I wasn't as valuable as the people with the degrees and the hard skills and the logical folks. And it was just awkward. And then in 2009, I went to the TED conference for the first time and just had my mind blown by those unbelievable speeches. And, to my credit, Brandon, the first thing I thought was, wow, I've been a public speaker my whole life, but I've never done that. So there was something special there. And I came back, got really involved in TED and TEDx at one of the first early TEDx's. I was volunteering for my friends who were running it, TEDx Santa Monica. And we had this guy who had all the hard skills in the world, had the most interesting topic of the day, was the guy I was looking forward to seeing. But when he got up on stage and started to speak, everybody in the room checked out because he was so nervous and awkward that we all thought we were going to throw up.
Wow.
And it was so sad because I'd worked with people like that so much, who had so much education and such a desire to make a difference, and were so brilliant, but just couldn't communicate very well. Yeah. And so I was really sad for a little while. And then the evil part of me kicked in. And I remember, quietly to myself, at least, I sat there in my chair and was just going, ha, 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 ha. Hard skills guy is blowing it. Neener, calls what I do fluffy, And as I was sitting there indulging the evil part of myself, my buddy Michael Weiss came over and completely, utterly, totally changed my life. He leaned down and he said, dude, we got to do something to help people like this. And it was like the clouds parted, the angels sang, like all those trite metaphors that you've heard before. Like, I could have had a V8. I was like, if I just get over myself, I could totally make a difference for this guy. And I went home that night and I started working on what I now, as you said, get to deliver all over the world. I pinch myself when I hear you say that about me. I'm like, really? But it's because of that moment. And here's what I did differently. I realized that if I wanted to make a difference for that guy, I would have to base everything I did in human evolutionary biology and human neurophysiology, so I could show people like him, but it turns out everybody's interested, not only what works when it comes to influence and leadership and motivating people to action and generating trust and loyalty, but also why it works based in science. And the funny thing is, like, since it's based in science, it works like a charm. So that was a very good idea that I did up by accident, but when I put all those things together and went out into the world with that, it just changed my life. And, I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs listening and solopreneurs and others like that. So I'll give you a little bit, I'll give you one more piece about this. At that moment, I was probably $30,000-$40,000 in debt. And I had millions of dollars of stock that would never turn liquid. And that had been my whole life up to that point, working at startups for way too much, way too many stock options that would never become valuable, way too little pay. I was just always in debt that had been a long time. And the first year that I started doing what I'm doing now, I went even further in debt. But the next year, I kind of started to break even. The third year, I made more than I ever made in my whole life by quite a bit. The next year, I doubled that plus. The next year, I tripled that plus. And it's kind of gone that way since. And here's one of the takeaways. When people say do what you love, like you have to do something you love that matters to other people, right? That solves a problem for them, that they're willing to pay for. I get that, right? Like, so for sure that. But here's the reason that do what you love is so powerful. It's easy to be an overnight success when you've been doing something for 10 years. And if you don't love it, there's no way you're going to do it long enough to get to the point where you actually succeed with it. So do what you love is all about being able to sustain it, mentally and emotionally and internally.
That's so true. There's a lot that you said there that I want to unpack because it's so valuable, especially that final part about how it took you several years in this business in order to start earning money and to start really eliminating those debts. And I want to
Yeah.
talk about that because, like you said, we think about this overnight success and we think about how it's not coming to us as quickly as we want it to. And maybe we should switch business models. Maybe we should solve a different problem. And then we
Change the
start,
logo.
yeah, and work on the website and what's not working. But really, it's about that aggressive patience. So I want to touch on that. But when you went to this conference, the first TED conference you said you went to in
Yeah.
2009,
Yeah.
and you said, wow, I've spoken, but not like these people on the stage right now who are
Yes.
sharing these masterful ideas in a
Yeah.
beautiful way. What was it about these speakers, these leaders on the stage sharing their ideas that really stuck out to you? Like, what was it about them?
So I'm going to tell you that in hindsight, okay? Because I didn't know in the moment. I was just freaking floored. I was just like, what is going on here? I've never seen one talk this good, much less an entire slate of multiple days of talks this good. And here's what I've come to realize years later. I believe that so there really is a thing called the TED format, and it involves things like being personal, being vulnerable, telling us about the difficult stuff along with the good stuff, not being in it for yourself, really trying to say something that's going to land and matter over there for the audience. There are a lot of components that go into the TED format, but I think that what TED gets credit because they repopularized it, but it's not really the TED format. It's the original format. I have a friend who's a TEDx organizer who's living in Portugal right now, and just down the street from him, someone bought a big plot of land and was going to put in a bunch of apartment buildings. And as they started to dig, they found a 4,000 seat Roman, like Colosseum thing.
Wow.
And he said the first thing he thought is, wow, the Romans were doing TEDx events right here thousands of years ago, right? 1,000 years ago, whatever. So that is what's going on. They're like, we are programmed to respond to one person up in front of the group saying something saying something meaningful. I call it well chosen, well crafted, well delivered.
Mm.
And when someone does something that's well chosen, well crafted, well delivered, we are in. Like, we want to support them. We want to do what they want us to do. It's the effective format with human beings.
I know that there's a lot of leaders who are listening to who, they're either a business owner, they're a leader inside of an organization, a middle leader, and even a top leader. And I've, especially working in the corporate world for 10 years, I know that there's even a lot of top leaders who don't give a lot of presentations because they know that it's not their quote unquote safe place. It's not their unique ability. They pass. Like, I was one of the guys who gave all the presentations in a company of over 350 people for many years, and it helped me to hone my skills, but I also enjoy doing that. But a lot of people listening are going to say, well, is this applicable to me because I'm not giving these one-to-many presentations? Does this format hold any value when it comes to even the everyday conversations that we're having in the workplace with our team as a leader?
So this is a total slow pitch softball question, Brandon, and thank you for it, because this is really important. And the short answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. This format, if you will, understanding what's going on in, say, the TED format, understanding the neurobiology and the evolutionary biology of communication so that you can be an excellent presenter on stage, that goes everywhere in life, whether you ever present on stage or not. This is all about how human beings function. And, Brandon, as we were just saying hi this morning and getting this thing ready, we talked about one of my favorite equations. And because I'm the soft skills guy, I've got these equations, that I'm very proud of because I made them up so that I could communicate maybe a little more humorously with hard skills people. But so one equation is L equals F in little bracket, in parentheses of capital C. So capital L equals little c, little f in brackets of C. That says leadership is a function of communication. And that's what I truly believe. I think that as a leader, and if you look, Warren Buffett, et cetera, everybody says this who's in business. Your number one thing is communication. That's how we make things happen with other people, right? Think about it, if you're a leader and you aren't good at storytelling, well, all storytelling is not Once Upon a Time and Happily Ever After and Jack and Jill and all that kind of stuff. Storytelling in business that's useful is you conveying your experience with excellence, conveying that experience in a way that lands for people and gives them some understanding, insight, makes a point they didn't know before, right? So if you're a leader and you're not good at storytelling, then all of your experience is vastly diminished because it's only helping you, right?
Wow.
As a leader, you've got to be good at storytelling and be able to share those experiences you've had so that you can impact those around you. It's also, I think, storytelling and being a great leadership communicator. I've started to think, so first of all, let's start with my assumption. Company culture eats strategy for lunch every freaking day of the week.
Mhm.
And company culture, I've started to think about company culture as company mythology. And what's the most important part of mythology? All those stories
Yes.
about the characters and the things and the pieces that are important to the culture and the myth. So you are basically a mythological storyteller as a leader. And I know that's going to turn a lot of people off. I say it to get your attention, but that's how it works with human beings, because communicating with human beings is not logical, it's biological. And when you understand that and you can work with that, you will be vastly more effective.
It's so true
Right, my
because
little
even
rant. Sorry, I
no,
get
I
so
love it.
excited about it.
I love it. We've got people watching. They're like, that is deep because it's really true though. I mean, look at even when you look at religious texts, like you just talked about mythology, which is very much that, but even
Yeah,
the Bible isn't like step one, do this, step two, do this. The
yeah,
Bible is like, here's this story about John and what John overcame and the lessons he
yes,
learned. And you learn a lot more through a story than you do from someone just telling you, but you also take away a different
yeah,
interpretation from a story because it's your own interpretation of the events that happen. Like even when
yes.
giving a sales presentation, we would never go in and say, this is the first thing you want to do with the client. The second thing, this is the process. We had a format that I taught for a while of story, teach, call to action. Tell a
Okay,
story.
perfect. And I bet that works.
It worked great. Yes, and it got a great response
I
because
bet it
people were
does.
engaged in the story.
Yeah,
Then we taught the lesson from the story, and then we gave them something that they could use when they actually left, like a piece
yeah,
of homework or a challenge or some kind of action. So
yeah.
story, it's so important. Storytelling is so important, and I'm still thinking of, the people in their everyday exchanges between person to person in the workplace and even in the virtual community while they're on Zoom talking to each other. Like, what are some of the common mistakes that you
Oh
see a
boy.
lot of leaders or even executives making when they're communicating with their colleagues or their team or whoever it may be in the workplace?
So let's talk, because I don't want to forget it. Let's talk about the Zoom workplace and the virtual workplace first. And then let's try to remember to get back to what some of the fundamental mistakes are that just have been being made for way too long, even before we all jumped into Zoom. Yeah. So we'll
Okay,
start
sounds
with
good.
Zoom. Okay. So the first thing is, notice how Brandon is framed and how I'm framed here. And notice the lighting and the background. We've both thought about that quite a bit. you know? And I think that people are starting to catch on to this, but I still see people coming on and they'll be like, the big problem is usually people will be like down here, right? They'll be like, oh, hi, hey, how are you? And there's like all this room above their head, right? Well, okay, would you ever see a broadcaster like that? And broadcast is a great place to look at because they've been doing what we're now doing individually for a really long time, right? So they've figured things out. They don't do this, right? Don't come in on your laptop. If you're on your laptop, pull the screen forward a little bit so that you can, and then get that camera eye to eye. There's a reason people say, let's speak eye to eye, because that's what works for us. And think about the framing, get your head up to the top. And here's the thing, I've read at least one study about how much people like to see a little bit of your upper body. And Brandon, you're making me think, my desk is very narrow this way. I think my camera is a shade too close to me. I'd like to move it back like just a foot so that I could be like you. And because this is what you usually see a newscaster, right?
True.
Their arms above the table. So I think it's a very good framing that you've got. I'm thinking about how I could do that myself, but think about it, right? And if you even think about it, you'll do much better. Now, here's the other thing. So there's, framing, lighting, that whole setup. Now, here's another thing. Notice, in fact, I wonder if I could even show you. Here is okay, so I'm using my Yeti stereo microphone right now. I'm going to switch over to my phone this is my iMac microphone. Do you hear a difference?
Huge difference.
Right. And it still works. You can still understand me, but think about your leadership presence is now all about your virtual presence. And would you rather come across like this, or would you rather come across like this? Right.
Totally different.
And I'm going to get one of those Shure mics. Next time I have a big deal close, I'm getting one of those because they're so good. And this is a Blue Yeti, not nearly as expensive, still very good. But
they're incredible for everybody.
Pardon me?
They're incredible for everybody. That Blue Yeti is a $100 microphone that will last you for years and years. I remember when I became the market trainer for the company I worked with, I had one of those. No one else used them. And I had it right in front of me like you, but just seeing that microphone on the Zoom screen, people would always ask me, whoa, what is that thing? Right? Because it looks serious. It looks like you're a radio broadcaster.
And it's a great mic.
And you could be, obviously you don't want to be, but you could be elementary in skill. But when people see you with that in front of you, it automatically adds almost a level of authority and influence.
Absolutely.
To where you're coming from just by having a microphone in front of you.
Yes. And so the Blue Yeti is awesome. If you want to spend less and still get a really great USB mic, the Snowball is like $50, like $49 or something, and so get the first investment is not a new camera. The first investment is the sound, because people don't notice the video going bad for a long time. And when they notice the video going bad, they think it's the sound going bad. But when the sound goes bad, people notice immediately and they don't like it. Look at how much money theaters invested putting THX into the theater, right?
Yes.
Like, it's all about the sound. So, framing, lighting, that aspect. Then there's the sound. Now, here's this. I'll give you the secret key that I see people still making a huge mistakes with. I was on a call a little while ago with a guy who is at one of the biggest consultancies in the world. He's one of the top leaders of that global consultancy. He still needs to work with me. And he was talking to me like this. Oh, John, it's good to see you today. How are you? Yes. So why, blah, blah, blah. And he's looking at me on his second monitor. And that's how he does his video calls all day, I'm sure. Okay, well, guess what? Logically, I know he's looking at me, but that non-logical, really important other aspect of me as a human being, the biological aspect that I can't control, that's largely subconscious, thinks he's ignoring me because he's not looking at me. Right.
Yes.
So to talk to, like, I think he's talking to somebody else unconsciously. And it's a massive, massive hit to his leadership credibility. And he has no idea, you know. Now, here's the big secret. Instead of doing that, I like do what I think Brandon and I both do: drag your video right up underneath that camera, whatever camera you've got, drag the video right up underneath it and look into the camera. And in Hollywood, they call it make love to the camera, you know? And what I do is I don't see that black lens. That's not what I'm seeing. I'm looking into that black lens and I'm thinking about all the people out there that are listening to this, Brandon, who are willing to take a risk with their very life to make this world a better place. And I'm thinking about connecting with them. And I'm thinking about how much I just love people like that. And that's what I'm seeing when I look into the camera. And then every once in a while, I glance down and I make sure Brandon's still smiling and that he, okay, looks like things are going okay. He's still happy with me. He's not going to, end the broadcast or something. And here's the interesting thing. When we talk in person, we look each other in the eye, right? That's what we want. And we do that but we very often we glance down to just check out each other's mouths and chins and faces and things. So if you've got your video right up under the camera and you glance down once in a while, it's like having a natural conversation with you. And it is very difficult at first to speak into the lens, but hey, it's your leadership presence, right? It's how you show up. And then the other thing I'll say is if I love Simon Sinek's distinction between leaders who like because of their position on the chart and then those who lead, right? So no matter where you are on the org chart, you are a leader. And guess what? Leaders show up on video. If you're going to be in a meeting, be on video. If it's your meeting, you have to be. But if it's someone else's meeting and you're not on video, everybody sort of assumes you're doing something else, So if they can't see you, you're not in the meeting really. And look, on a subconscious, unconscious, biological level, that's absolutely true.
Listen, everyone, if you spend any amount of time on Zoom or whatever system you're using for your organization or your business, you have to rewind for the last 5 minutes there and re-listen to that and almost have a checklist of how am I showing up on video? Check, right? See the upper body. And by the way, you look great. You can still see the upper body. Like your whole setup there is incredible. And the only reason mine's so far away is because I'm literally using a DSLR camera because it gives me, it gives it a little bit different of a quality and of an effect. So check off, how do you appear on video right now on Zoom? Check that off. How is your audio quality? Get somebody who is like the person you can ask a question to and they're going to give you a real answer. Yes. Invest in a $90 Blue Yeti or get like the Yeti Mini, which is like $60 or $70. It is one of the best investments that you could possibly make. If you are a leader in a company, I would go to your upper leader and even ask if that can be something that the company provides. That's what happened with the company that I did a lot of work with. They got every single one of their team leads, 20 team leads, a Blue Yeti microphone. And they got them one of those Logitech webcams so that when you're looking at the Zoom screen, it doesn't look like you're too off base with the making eye contact. Because I really love how you said that. Because especially with me, and I know a lot of other solopreneurs and entrepreneurs out there who are on Zoom a lot and want to have that crisp video, I know they're also using a DSLR camera. Yeah. But the problem with the DSLR is if I'm looking into the lens like I am right now, the only reason that it looks like I'm making eye contact with you is because I do see you, because I have a teleprompter. I have a piece of technology that is mirroring my laptop screen, and the DSLR is right behind a mirror screen,
Yeah.
because it is so important. If you go back and watch a couple of the first interviews I've done, I was looking like this, like I am right now at the screen while
Yeah.
talking to somebody. And is it going to like make or break an interview to the listener? Probably not. But to the person I'm interviewing, it's not, you're lacking that human element. And I like how
Yeah.
you said so beautifully. Logically, we know that he's looking at me, right?
Yeah.
Logically, we know that that person is looking at me, but the like the what that chimp part of our brain, right? The lizard brain, as Joe Rogan would call it.
Mm,
That lizard brain is like, why isn't he paying attention to me? Why
yeah.
isn't he looking at me? Is this something to do with me? And it's like that subconscious part of our mind. So it's those little things of, how are you currently showing up virtually? Because virtual is here to stay. So
Yeah.
how
It's
are
not going
you
away. Like, we'll
exactly?
have mixed virtual, but virtual's not going away.
Yeah. And in 10 years, when we're holograms shooting into
Yeah.
people's
Right.
living rooms, then we'll be talking about other things like, what to
Right.
wear to be professional, how to
Yeah.
address the holographic audience around us. But
Right.
right now, our medium is this. So how can we best show up for this medium that we're in right now, which is so powerful?
Yeah. I mean, and if I can repeat myself, I think it is really true. Your leadership presence is now all about your virtual presence, how you show up in these things like Zoom and Teams and all that kind of stuff.
It's so true. And I'm curious because you said it earlier, and I don't hear a lot of other people talk about the science
Yeah.
behind effective communication and the science behind even giving like one of these TED Talks versus just a normal lackluster presentation.
Yeah.
So, how does neurobiology tie into powerful communication? Because I know we got some thinkers in the audience
Yeah.
listening who like to know these actual pieces
Yes.
of science. So, what does that look like, and how does it tie in?
So I'll tell you that, and let me just preface it with something really quickly for people that are listening. I suffered from a really big problem for a really long time, and it doesn't sound like a problem at first. I suffered from the massive problem that I was always the best speaker at the conference. And if I wasn't the best speaker at the conference, I was at least top 3, and usually I was the best. Okay, well, so what's the problem with that? Well, here's the problem. The bar at those conferences was so freaking low that it's embarrassing to look back on now, right? And what I realized that when I went to TED was like, if I was satisfied with the bar that I had been clearing with ease, I was never going to get anywhere close to my full potential, you know? So let's talk about the number one piece of neurobiology that I think people miss when it comes to these presentations, lackluster presentations, as you said, and also to just one-on-one communication, small group communication, sales communication, like any communication with human beings. And so here's the number one piece of neurobiology. If you look at a cross section of the human brain, you'll see the brain stem. And then wrapped around that is the midbrain. And together, these two things form what's called the paleomammalian brain, the limbic system, or the emotional brain. And listen, for you science nerds out there, I know it's not this totally clear cut, but this is still super functional. Okay. So the brainstem, the midbrain, that's the paleomammalian brain or the emotional brain or the limbic system. And then wrapped around the outside of that, very importantly, is the cerebral cortex, the neocortex, the new brain. So we've got the paleomammalian old brain, and then wrapped around it is the neocortex new brain. And why is that important? Well, here's why that's important. Because the ancient brain doesn't have access to language or logic or reason. That's all in the neocortex. Okay. It doesn't have access to language or logic or reason, but Brandon, it does have access to reality on a fundamentally deeper level than we will ever have access consciously. That's weird. So what do I mean? Here's what I mean. This is a part of the brain, the ancient part of the brain. It's been tasked with keeping us alive for eons, right? That's its job. And it sees things like facial microexpressions, and it smells things like pheromones, and it hears things, and it sees patterns in things that we'll never, ever notice consciously. But crucially, it doesn't have access to language or logic or reason. So it can't talk to us. So how does it communicate? Here it is. It's perceiving all these things that we don't notice consciously, right? It's like, oh, I see that, or I notice a pattern, or I smell that pheromone, or gee, I think I hear something really weird, but it can't just say, hey, So here's how it communicates with us: gut feelings. Our ancient paleo mammalian brain that can see things and notice things we'll never notice consciously tells us about those things through gut feelings. So quick side note, if your mom didn't tell you, I'm telling you now, trust your gut. That is actually good information, and start getting good at delineating what's your gut and what's just you being paranoid and whatever. But if you've got like if the elevator door opens and the hair stands up on the back of your neck and you don't want to get in there, don't get in there. Because if it's a nice person, they'd want you to trust your gut. And if it's not a nice person, which is probably what the case is, if you react like that, you don't want to be in there, right? So trust your gut. However, we all think we live in our logical brain, right? John, I get what you're saying and I understand the biology, but like I weigh things out and I check the boxes and I make logical choices and decisions. Okay, well, even if you do all that stuff, when it comes time for you to make that decision, if we put you in an fMRI machine and watched your brain in real time as you made that decision, here's what we would see. Boom, the paleo mammalian brain fires first, making the decision. Then right after that, nanoseconds after that, the neocortex fires, agreeing with or disagreeing with, but not making the decision. So here's what that looks like in real life, Brandon. Tell me if you've had this experience. Do you like the product? Oh, yeah, we like the product. You think it's priced right? Certainly, certainly. You think it would make a difference for you? Oh, yes. Well, do you want to sign the check and we'll start delivery? Nah, we're not ready yet. We want to think about it a little more.
Yes.
Right? Okay, you've been there, right?
Oh, all
Okay.
the time. Yep.
All right. And look, it gets frustrating, right? I work with people like Accenture and places like that. They're out pitching multi-million dollar deals, work with entrepreneurs raising capital, like they're trying to raise tens of millions of dollars in the healthcare space, things like that. It's very frustrating to get yes, 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 no. And it seems like they're lying to you. Why would they say yes and then say no? Okay. It's super obvious in hindsight. Here we go. Ready? Yes, 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 no. Logic, 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 emotion. We did not make an emotional connection with them. Logically, they were all in, right? But here's the thing. Here's another one of my great sayings that I'm so proud of as a soft skills guy. Logic is necessary, but it is not sufficient.
Wow.
Logic is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You must have an emotional connection of some kind, or the logic will just bounce off.
So how do you tie in that emotion? Should you tie in logic first and then emotion? Or like what do you recommend there for those who are looking to share a message, have it stick, get the buy-in as a leader? How do you tie in that emotional connection?
So there, look, there are a number of ways to do this, right? And more subtle and less subtle. But the number one thing that I think that I go for personally in my stuff when I'm on my game is until you have an emotional connection, all the logic in the world just bounces off. So how can you set up an emotional connection in that first 30 seconds of the pitch, or that first minute, maybe minute and a half of things, And so I think going for that emotional connection one way or another is the first job. Because if you can do that, now people resist this, right? People are like, I don't like storytelling. I don't like this emotional connection. Are you kidding? I've seen people do this. It's so gross. Okay, what you've seen that's gross is people doing this wrong. People doing this inauthentically, people doing this as a manipulation. And we all hate that. And that's not what I'm saying. I am absolutely 100% opposed to inauthentic manipulation, right? I feel like I've got a lightsaber here. I've got those tools of a Jedi. And look, the dark side uses them very well, right? The light side, maybe not as much, right? But don't use this when you use this for yourself, and it's that kind of a thing, and it's selfish, and I call that manipulation. But when you use this stuff authentically for influence, that's influence, right? So there's a difference between influence and manipulation, and the big differentiator is authenticity, right? And what are you out for? If you're out to rip them off, nah. But if you're out to give them a product that's really going to work for them and make a huge difference for them, and they're going to be thrilled about it, go for it. They don't mind. Like, look, I was thrilled to buy my iMac. I was thrilled to buy my Blue mic, right? I'm excited about being sold as Shure.
With what you just said too, this tapping into the emotional piece before you just go for the logic. I have two examples, and the thing I want to say first is it doesn't need to be difficult. Like doesn't need to be, like you said, like, okay, how am I going to connect emotionally to this person? It simply could be something as easy as when they hop on to the Zoom screen, you have your whole setup set up in a way that is clean, professional. It causes the person to be at ease, right? But also, yes. I think of a study that was done where these people went out onto the streets and they were selling flowers, and they just walked up to people saying, "Would you like to buy this flower? Would you like to buy this flower?" The people who simply didn't ask if the person wanted to buy the flower, but they instead went up first, and all they did was they added in the question, "Hey, by the way, how are you today?" And the person said, "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" And the person says, "I'm great. By the way, we're selling flowers. Would you be interested in buying one of these roses?" It increased their odds of selling the roses by 35%. And the only thing they did was they added the human element, the emotional element of how are you doing? That's it. We had this guy in the office too, John, who his name was James, and he's probably listening. And I tell him this, and we use him as an example all the time. James wasn't the strongest, most natural salesperson, right? He didn't have the world's most solid grasp of the price plans of even the product at times. But everyone always says, why is it that James literally makes twice as much money as me every single month without fail?
Yeah.
Well, customers would walk in, and those people, some of them being leaders, would greet the customer from their desk. And the customer would have to walk across the store or even walk a short distance and then sit down. So they're in a place of almost inferiority. But James always made it a point to stand up, walk to the door, and he stretched out his hand and said, "Hi, I'm James. What's your name?" And that human connection caused that customer to connect to James in an emotional way, where the other person who simply beckoned them over to their desk, that is all logic. Like, that is just, what do you need? How can I help you fill your need? Yes. Right. And that person would get to the end and everything would be right. The price would be right. The product would be right. But the person would say no.
Yes,
With James,
no.
The person wanted to buy from him because of that emotional connection.
Yes. And look, the other thing that just gives me goosebumps about that example, is so simple and it gives me goosebumps, is because the humility, the service, right? The being of service of James, his willingness to get up and go over and hold out his hand first and say, "Hi, I'm James. What's your name?" Right? That is such humility and service. And Brandon, the root word for sales comes from a Scandinavian word that means to serve.
It's true. It's true. Sales is service. So when people say things like, "You're a great salesman," it's like, that's awesome, because to me, selling is serving. Selling is taking this issue you have and solving that with my product, my service. And if I don't have that, I'm going to refer you to somebody who can help you with that. I'm not just going to sell you something because it's my only product. I'm going to get you to someone who can actually help to solve your problem. And that humility also translates in the same exact way to leadership. Before you have the performance review, say, "Hey, how are you? How is your wife? How is your husband?
Yes.
How's everything going with the new house? What specifically can I help you with in your
Yeah.
life right now? Like, the human connection is the emotional connection.
Yes.
That's awesome. We've talked about a lot of incredible things here. I can't imagine what's in your Live Like a Leader program if this is what we're talking about here on the podcast. So I know that you have an ongoing Live Like a Leader program, but you also have your Speak Like a Leader bootcamp. So John, could you, in the next few minutes, talk to me about these programs that you offer and how we can get more information on those?
Absolutely. So I've got, first of all, an online version of the principles that I've worked out over the last 10 years that lead to what I call an excellent TED format talk. And the thing I've realized over the last decade is that creating a TED-like talk using the formula and the formats and the principles from neurobiology and evolutionary biology that I put into this course, I believe it's the best leadership experience that anyone could go through, whether you're going to give a TED-like talk or whether you're just only doing one-on-ones and small group meetings and all hands meetings and stuff. It doesn't matter, right? This stuff is important everywhere, and it will make its way powerfully and well into all of your conversations with other human beings. So those principles are all contained in a bundle that I call this Speak Like a Leader boot camp. And we've got a self-paced version of that. And Brandon, we've got we don't like the idea of Black Friday, so we just gave everybody a Black Friday deal all November, and I think we might even put it into December since that's Christmas. And this would make an enormous difference in who you would be in 2022, right? So we've got a good deal. I'll give you the coupon for that, and that's a self-paced course that comes with a very new community. So there's not many people in it yet, but my goal is to get at least 300 entrepreneurs in there that are cross supporting each other, that all know these principles, and make that a robust community over time. And then it also comes with at least once a month, probably we'll do more as more people sign up, Ask Me Anything. So you do my course, you get those principles, come in, I'll personally help you once a month at least. And so that's the self-paced course. And then we have another version which includes that whole thing, but it's also 10 weeks of small group coaching in an 8-person cohort over 10 weeks. And at the end of that 10 weeks, at the 10th session, you'll deliver your TED-like talk to the other people in the course. We'll record it on Zoom, and you'll have something that you can go use on social media, you can use on the internet, put out, right? Whatever you want to do with it. And then I also have an ongoing course called Live Like a Leader. And in the Live Like a Leader course, we work with these principles that are in the Speak Like a Leader bootcamp, but we bring the added element of the power of being a fully integrated leader. And the thing that guides everything that I do in that course and everything I'm thinking about is the quote that's attributed to Gandhi, and it's attributed to Native American culture, and it's attributed to a bunch of places. But the idea that if you've got a personality that's made up of twigs, if those twigs are laying in different directions, they're just kind of laying in a pile, any of those twigs is easily broken. But if you get those things in alignment and you bundle them up, and you have this bundle of twigs that makes up your personality, that bundle is unbreakable. And so that's what we're out to create for leaders. And people are having enormous breakthroughs in that course. One woman who was not very happy in her job took it on, ended up really coming alive, wrote a job description of what she'd really like to be doing, gave it to one of the vice presidents in her company, and guess what her job is now? Exactly what she wrote down. So, we've got people that are just, some people that are still trying to figure out what it is. They know they've got a message for the world and they're working on that message and they got an idea, but we're helping them hone it. Other people are already out there speaking all over the world, transforming education, transforming business. So, people in any stage of that. And it's just one of the most fulfilling things I've ever been a part of in my whole life. So all that stuff, the Live Like a Leader program, if someone just wants to go directly into that, they need to apply and they can just go to the website and let us know, hey, I heard you on Be Better. Would love to be part of that. Send me some information. The other courses are available at ed.executivespeakingsuccess.com. We've got one of those cohort based things that, like, the self-paced is available always. We've got one of the cohort based courses starting again on January 19th.
That's incredible. You got so many different resources here, guys, based on what it is you're looking to improve. And if you're looking to put all those things together and just be a well-rounded, integrated, world-class leader, this Live Like a Leader program, go to executivespeaking.com and apply for that opportunity. If you're looking to improve your communication abilities and specifically speak like a leader, a world-class leader, check out John's Speak Like a Leader Bootcamp, and you can get right to the course page at ed.executivespeakingsuccess.com. Links are in the description, as well as any kind of coupon code that John sends our way. The links will be right in the description here for you. John, very excellent talk, just a world-class talk. And my final question for you is, what is the positive impact that you're looking to make on the world during this chapter of your life?
Brandon, I feel like I found my ikigai, which is the Venn diagram of everything that matters, where all that stuff crosses, like what you love to do, what the world needs, what you get paid to do, your vocation, your avocation. Like, I feel like this is it. And it really is captured in my why statement. My why is to bring out what's awesome inside forward thinking global leaders, people who want to make a difference so they can have the impact they want to have in the world. I want to have a huge impact in the world. And, you can have whatever you want as long as you're willing to help enough other people get that. And I know that the tools that I have are, it's been a decade now, so false modesty aside, it's staggering the difference these things make for people that are really up to something. And I love people who are up to something. And I don't ever want to see someone stand up and talk about their brilliant idea in a way that actually brings it down. Like, if you look at it, if you're doing $1 million work, but your presentation is only like a 0.5, now you're doing $500,000 work, even though you're actually doing $1 million work. But if you're doing $1 million work and your presentation is a 10, well, now you're doing $10 million work, right? And it's not fair. You could argue that's not fair, but how you talk about your ideas, how you talk about your company, how you communicate what you're up to, your value, it has an outsized, disproportionate impact on how it's all perceived. And that's where I come in. I want your ideas. I want you to, the way you talk about your ideas, to be as good as your ideas.
Well said, and a valiant mission, and you're out there doing it. You're out there reaching people, and you're continuing on. And this was just an overall incredible conversation, John. Thanks for sharing all your leadership and first impression and many different influence strategies here with the audience, because no matter who you are, you're a leader, right? And as long as you take one of these things and apply it, you're going to be better off because of it.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, John. It was a pleasure.
You are very welcome, Brandon. I'm happy to be a part of your mission too.
If you're a leader anywhere, you've got something to take out of this conversation. We talked about everything from how to become a world-class leader virtually in the workplace. We talked about how to be world-class when it comes to the first impressions you make. We also dived into the science of logic versus emotion, the power of getting that emotional trigger down first, because you can have all the logic in the world, but if you're not reaching someone at the human level, then it's all in vain. So no matter who you are, as a leader, you have a message you want to share, and your ability to communicate that message is everything. So like John says, he's got several different programs you can check out. The first is the Executive Speak Like a Leader Bootcamp, which is great for any leader, by the way. And you can find that at ed, like education, ed.executivespeakingsuccess.com, link in the description, as well as John's upcoming Live Like a Leader program, which you have to apply for. It begins in January. But if you are ready for that level of growth, for that level of progress, links are in the description. As always, if you found any value from this episode, in this conversation at all, share this with one person. That's how our show has been growing over the past 6 months, and it's all because of you, and I thank you so much for that. Share this with one colleague, friend, or anyone who can use this information. And until you and I talk again, continue to be better.